Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at Volnus Prime. I've got a couple builds in store for you today, so I'm going to try to get through them a bit quicker. We'll be looking at a general build for melee specific gameplay, a build with options that relies on a primer, and finally taking a look at how it sits as a heavy attack weapon. So let's hop right in. Volnus Prime is obviously the primed variant of Volnus. Featuring higher stats, it is a bit better off out of the box and also has more polarities, with a Zero Forma build being easily fully slottable. On the other hand, it lost its sky-high disposition as a prime, making it quite a bit worse off than the vanilla if you include Rivens, at least for the next year or two. That said, even the buffs themselves were minor. It gained only 2% critical chance in an already lacking department. This was alongside 0.2x more critical damage and 4% more status chance. It also received a slight damage bump from 220 to 250. I would say it is definitely the underwhelming of the two new prime weapons, but that's not the point of this video. I'm here to show you what has changed and what it can do. We'll be going through a melee exclusive build, a prime-rated build, a quick check at initial heavy builds, and why a 12x efficiency build will be better for heavy attacks. So let's take a look at the first build. First, the stance. Shattering Storm has much higher paper DPS, but feels like crap to use. Crushing Ruin has much wider swings and fluid motion while also carrying you forward somewhat, letting you take full advantage of range builds and not breaking the flow of gameplay, so we're sticking with this. Now this is a solo melee build, not focused on any other interactions. This is an out-of-the-box Zero Forma setup. You don't even need to fully rank it, as it only uses 64 mod points. Condition Overload because the build will proc all sorts of IPS as well as the viral we are building for, so this will easily outdamage Prime Pressure Point after the first hit while also fueling into our /ticks. Prime Reach to take full advantage of the stance's wide swings, Berserker for attack speed, then our staples Weeping Wounds and Blood Rush for scaling crits and status. You're at 152% crit chance and 193.8% status while you're at max combo, Organ Shatter for critical damage, and finally the interesting bit. We are building viral with the 60/60 cold and toxin mods, but leaving them at rank 0. Most of our status will be coming from Weeping Wounds, totaling to an additive 440%, so the amount of status the 60/60 mods could give is mostly irrelevant. We're only equipping them to actually get viral on the build. We also want to preserve as much slash weighting as possible, so that's why they are rank 0. This way we are much more likely to get slash proc still than say if we fully ranked the mods and had primarily viral on the build. /DOTs don't care about elementals for the calculation, so we are not losing any /tick damage doing this. We are only losing upfront hit damage, which if you need to rely on /ticks, your upfront damage honestly is going to be poor due to armor. Viral as a damage type also isn't that hot, so this loss is irrelevant. If you want better crit scaling, you'll need 2 gladiator mods elsewhere, be it on Deconstructor or your frame, to get near 200% critical chance for consistent orange crits. To maintain this combo, we're also going to be running Neramon for Power Spike. This way we don't need to dedicate an entire mod slot or frame aura for it. Time to test this toy out. I know I'm testing on tanky units, but we are looking for /ticks, which ignore armor. So the tankier they are, the more ticks they will live, which can really let us see how big the numbers are. Of all the hammers in game, Volnus is the one best suited for slash out of the box without relying on Rivens. That said, the other top tier hammers have really strong quirks going for them. Fragger doesn't have slash but has insane base damage and crit stats, as well as unique base 30 and 8 combo, letting you easily run 4x heavy attack builds. It really doesn't fail to one-shot anything, except in true endurance runs. Archetytron gains charges that lets you discharge them into a massive AoE slam attack with ridiculous damage, and with the minus impact Riven turns into a pure slash weapon, making it objectively the best hammer with Rivens. Then you have Jat Kateg, which works well on grouping enemies, dealing 60% health damage with its augment that scales with condition overload, faction damage, and stealth bonuses, effectively one-shotting anything up to level cap. So with these all in the picture, Volnus seems quite lackluster, but that doesn't mean the weapon doesn't work. We can see here it still does a respectable amount of damage and holds its own as the only slash hammer out of the box. Of course, running it as a solo melee is incredibly limiting, so that's why we're going to take a look at the second build, which assumes you do have a primer present. This way we don't have to waste 2 slots on making viral. The only 2 mods that have changed are those viral mods on the build, and I've opted for Prime Smite as slash double dips, and we really want to take advantage of that since slash is all this weapon really has to offer, as it has no other interesting quirks like the other hammers or overwhelming damage. Prime Fury is actually our flex slot here. It is to personal taste. If you're running Arcane Strike or Frame with mobility skills, then you can probably skip it and not stack it with Berserker. Volnus is the fastest hammer after all. If you don't want to run Prime Fury, I would strongly recommend Spring-Loaded Blade instead because the stance has so many horizontal swings. You can imagine the range increase as more of a quasi-radial increase, which ends up covering a lot more range than you would think of at first glance. Imagine doubling the length of a line, like Nikana strikes, versus doubling the radius of a circle, like spin attacks. While the line gains 2x more attack area, the circle gains 4 times as much due to the radius being squared for area coverage. The partial semicircle swings of Crushing Ruin benefit similarly. For the primer, I'm just going to bring Kuva Nucor. It's a simple primer and easy to use for testing purposes as well as doing well in practice. Once the crowds are set up, you can just go to town like the normal build on the first setup. You can freely instant switch between these two weapons so it flows naturally. There isn't much of a game flow disruption. There's a huge difference in damage output because of the smite on the slash ticks, but also the frequency of attacks with Prime Fury or the extra range on swings from Spring-Loaded Blade. This is what I would consider a full-fledged Volnus Prime build. It's more than enough for everything. Although it does pale in comparison to the other hammers or more common slash setups that come to mind like Cronin Prime, it is still extremely serviceable. Plus it makes nice swishy sounds on swings to boot. Now let's take a look at a heavy build. So this is your generic heavy build for this weapon, but there are a couple of issues with this that I want to point out and why you cannot use this weapon as an ordinary 2x heavy setup. First, let's take a look at status. At 34% and no forced slash on the heavy attacks, we have no reasonable way to inflict slash, especially with the amount of windup on the weapon archetype. The weapon also suffers on the critical chance side, barely passing 100% chance on heavy swings, so all you will ever see are yellows. I'm forced to run Proton Snap for the flat status chance to try and sustain slash because this weapon doesn't have the massive firepower of Fragger, the quirk of AoE overwhelming damage of Titron, or the AoE spam of Katag's Augment. There are no reasonable ways to get status. But this screws the IPS weighting because Volnus is only 46% slash to start out with, so you can barely even call it a slash weapon. Now the toxin damage you get from Proton Snap really screws with your procs. Additionally, if you really want to make sure it procs 100% status, your only other way is to slot empowered blades into your aura. This is fine for normal missions and makes the bleed stronger as well, but this also means you will never really have full shield gating in Steel Path, which can be problematic and technically restricts your frame setups to get your shield backs more reliably or to certain frames. Without Force Slash and unique strong quirks, we would want to supplement the damage with Condition Overload. The problem is Condition Overload is additive to Combo Multiplier. They get the same damage bims, so we don't really get much benefit there either. We're also running Killing Blow, which is another base damage mod to cut back on the heavy swing down to 0.5 seconds. Because hammers have a base 1.2 second windup. If you don't run this, it will be much more painful. Amalgam Organ Shatter alone only dropped to 0.7 seconds, so this is up to you. If you must run Condition Overload on this 2x heavy setup, you would be dropping Killing Blow. Hopefully you can see why the standard 2x combo heavy build doesn't really work that well on Volnus Prime. So let's take a look at a build that does work. This is a 12x heavy build focused around maintaining the high combo to fuel the damage and status procs. This is much more involved build, but it also has much more potential. You will see I actually slotted Prime Pressure Point, and this is because of how Condition Overload is additive to combo like I said. We are still running the staple Primed Reach and Berserker like our light attack build so we can cover more area faster. Your standard Weeping Wounds and Blood Rush also make a return because we actually have combo this time. Amalgam Organ Shatter is there to help the windup at the small cost of critical damage. Finally, we have Reflex Coil and Drifting Contact. Reflex Coil makes our heavy swings cost less so that we won't be resetting our combo as much with each swing. You may be wondering why we don't have a Bane anymore. That's because with the 12x combo fueling our slash ticks, it really isn't necessary. Then we have Drifting Contact, which gives us a little extra status as well as combo duration. We are effectively at 200% status with it and Weeping Wounds at 12x combo. But why do we need combo duration? Well, that's because this particular build actually doesn't use Naramon. We will be using Zeneric instead for Inner Might, which will stack on top of Reflex Coil to give us the cap to 90% heavy attack efficiency. This means each time you heavy swing, you will only drop from 12x combo back down to 11. With just a couple of quick swings, you will be back up to 12x in no time, especially with the stance's horizontal swings and the extra modded range. Zeneric also provides you passive energy regen to your frame kit with Energizing Dash and Energy Pulse, so let's test this final build out on our enemies. Well, that was very underwhelming. Let's try that again, but with Nucor for some viral. That still didn't work well. Why is this? This is because of a stat called follow through, and this is actually the exact reason why we do not build hammers for heavy attacks. They do not have the force slash procs we want so much, are clunky, and also have the worst follow through stat. What is follow through? Follow through is a weapon stat that determines how much final damage is dealt to each successive target hit in a single swing. This reduced damage is then also used to calculate slash DOTs, which can severely nerf your damage as seen here. For the wiki example, Scanna has a value of 0.6, meaning it does 60% to the second enemy, 36% to the third, 21.6 to the fourth, and etc. Smites also have a value of 0.6, but they have forced slash procs on top of any other applicable modded elements. Meta choices like Cronin Prime don't have force slash on Tonfa heavies, but they still share a follow through stat of 0.6 and have an 80% innate slash bias. Volnus Prime has a follow through stat of 0.4. This means each successive enemy hit in the swing will take 40% damage of the previous only. So the second enemy only takes 40%, the third takes 16, and we're already down to 6.4% by the fourth enemy. It also only has an innate slash bias of 46%. Not only is it only half as likely to proc slash as, say, Cronin Prime, but the relative's third enemy already takes less than half of Cronin's damage, and the fourth enemy is near 1/4. Simply put, hammers are extremely unlikely to kill more than 3 enemies in a single swing, which is counterintuitive to building for range to overcome the slow archetype for normal and heavy attacks. The verdict? Keep it as a light weapon. Use the first and second builds I showed you. Save the heavy build for another weapon. Use 12x heavy setups when weapons can't sustain force slash on 2x heavy. And that's it. A comprehensive breakdown on Volnus Prime and where it stands. Is it good? Yes, I would say it's fairly good. Is it meta? Definitely not. But meta is busted and anything can work, and being able to proc a decent amount of slash is more than enough. It also is a beautiful weapon that fashions extremely well. Hopefully the information here can help you make an informed decision on what you want to do with Volnus Prime. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like, or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to bring you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've done with covering Tempestari. I'm also preparing to get you the info first out once the Sisters of Parvos mainline drops. Stay tuned for more uploads in the future on a near daily basis. That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.